Friday, thank goodness. Went to the office, came back.
Yeah. Excuse me.
You know,
I know.
we just
I
sat for 2 minutes while Paul tried to figure this out, and the first thing he does is change.
I
So where are you?
I'm in the steerage section of the Titanic.
How's the band?
I can barely hear them.
Good.
It sounded like we hit something.
No, I am sure it was nothing.
Yeah, I'll just stay.
They probably dropped a drum or something, hit the side of
Yeah, exactly.
the wall.
No, I'm in Massachusetts at a friend's house.
Boston.
Yeah.
How's the snow there? Is there any?
Snowstorm?
Actually, I don't know.
No snow.
So when I went up to the office, we were supposed to get 6 to 8 inches of snow at my house.
Yeah.
And, like schools were just canceling like everything. It's all done. Paul, they woke up the next morning. There was maybe a half inch, maybe. There was nothing. My daughter was devastated. She calls me. She's like, "What happened to science?" Like,
Wow.
I mean,
In a stunning reminder of how stupid Pennsylvania is. Went to the gym on Wednesday, and as I'm in there, I'm looking around, and like all of a sudden, it's like full of like high school students, like it was Christmas break or something, you know?
yeah.
As I call it, the daycare center. And I don't like it when it's like that, you know? So anyway,
Sure.
I finished up, walked outside, drove home, and as I'm driving home, the first little flake hit, you know, kind of came in the air, and then it was actually kind of snowing, and we actually got a couple of inches of snow, but then it rained like torrentially for almost 24 hours, and the snow was gone. But anyway, the point of all that is Pennsylvania, which I used to be very familiar with when my daughter was in the school system, or not Pennsylvania, but the Emmaus High School, which is canceled school because they heard it might snow that day, and it did. But you know, by the time those kids would have been going home from school, they would have been going home to flurries. So the whole school day went by with no snow, and that's how much they care about education in Pennsylvania. You know.
Well, my daughter had school, and she was not happy about it. She went to bed thinking, tomorrow I'm going to get to go up and make a snowman. Yep.
Sorry. No, it's the last time. In fact, we're almost on the exact date. The last time we had no snow in Boston like this far into the winter, was this winter of 2015. And that's when we had 6 feet of snow on the ground. And that's the year we had to replace our roof and all of our windows.
I remember
they
that.
were destroyed by the ice. And that was the year, in the back of my little lizard brain, I said, I'm leaving this place.
And now you're back.
Well, we're visiting, you know.
No, I know what you mean.
But,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, keeping the trend of good news, every company is reporting earnings are just falling off a cliff for the most part. Microsoft's earnings were okay, but Intel down 32%, smartphone sales down, Windows OEM revenue down, Xbox down. Like it's...
Yeah, Brad, you go away for 3 days and the whole industry collapsed.
I know. This is absolutely my fault. I'll take the blame.
I would like to think we're taking a big hit now so things can normalize, but the problem is Microsoft, Intel, and I'm sure other companies soon are all saying, it's not over yet. And their predictions for the current quarter are that it's actually going to be even worse.
Yeah. Well, you got to figure it's probably going to be like this every quarter because remember, they only do year-over-year comparisons. It's not quarter to quarter. So you got to get through 2023, and then maybe 2024 we'll actually see growth, but I doubt it will be back up to what it was, right? Like it'll drop and then we'll climb eventually.
You're right. You are right about that. But the thing that we've been clinging to, like this little life preserver of hope, is, and we see this particularly in the PC market, but we're going to see it in the smartphone market and probably elsewhere as well, is this notion that, yes, things have fallen and yes, the results are bad, but the numbers are still above pre-pandemic levels, right? That's not being said anymore. Microsoft very explicitly said, that's not the case. And Intel just said the same thing. And it's like, we used to say that. We did say, we said that in the second quarter last year. We said it in the third quarter last year. Now we're like, no. Nope. We're going below pre-pandemic levels now. Or hitting. I'm sorry. No one has actually said that. What they've said is we are now back to pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah, I actually got a question from Joe Finn, and I think it's appropriate to ask you what you would think.
Okay.
Do you think and you'd have to do it as more personal computing, would be better off if it was spun out into its own company?
Well,
It's
Well,
tough.
so yeah, these things are complicated. So I think one of the reasons that Microsoft invents this little pseudo business called Microsoft Cloud now, which used to be what, like Commercial Cloud or something,
Hmm.
is that the way their business is structured is almost overly simple. There are only three primary business units, so
Yeah.
there are bits in each of the business units, you know. So in the case of something like Microsoft 365, for example, which is mostly in uh, productivity and business services or whatever that's called,
Hmm.
bits of it are actually elsewhere too, including Windows, right? Windows is part of that business. So Windows is in more personal computing. Um, for Windows specifically,
Hmm.
architecturally, a lot of that work comes out of the Azure group now.
Yeah, that is
In
true.
fact, I'm sorry, all of that work comes out of the Azure group. So when you talk about like splitting Microsoft up, I was just looking at the antitrust stuff, interestingly, and
Hmm.
the split that Thomas Penfield Jackson wanted was, if I remember correctly, was something along the lines of like applications and operating systems, and so you could kind of make a case there like that would
Hmm.
be okay. Today, Microsoft, I know they don't do this to protect themselves from splitting up, but I mean, the reality is that bits of this are around the
Yeah.
company. So no, I mean, I think something, well, even Xbox, right? Xbox is one of those things where people, I've called for this for many years. They should just spin off Xbox, right?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, the architecture of the Xbox One came out of Hyper-V, which came out of Windows Server, which is,
Yeah, that's
part of
true.
Azure, blah, 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 whatever. Um, I'm sure I don't know the current system exactly, but I mean, the Xbox Series X and S, I'm sure it's based somewhere in Windows, so there's overlap. And I don't know how you do that clean. I mean,
Yeah, well, it'd be
I,
very hard to do cleanly. And the other thing we don't know is how much does revenue flow around? Because obviously Windows at one point was the
yeah,
the cash cow building
yep.
Azure. At some point in history, that's how when they called it Red Dog, probably wasn't that what it was back in the
Yeah,
day?
that's exactly what it was. That's why I was just going over that part of history too. That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
Red Dog.
and then at some point, probably now, Windows revenue inside that group might be helping Xbox do what it's doing currently because they're spending a lot of money over there. So it's always murky.
Here's the thing to remember, because things are down now, but like it Microsoft is still growing.
Oh yeah, they made
It like Yeah.
$16.2 billion.
So people, I wouldn't focus on things like profit, which we only see at the very highest level of the company. You don't see profit per business unit, right? So we don't really
Hmm.
know. But revenues, revenues, year over year might be problematic, but they're still revenues, right?
Yeah,
And the more personal computing, I don't remember the exact number, but it was probably like $14 billion. This is a business that made $14 billion,
in a
like
quarter.
in
In
revenues
a
in a
quarter.
quarter. This is not a loss leader,
Yeah,
necessarily. I mean, Surface, you can make cases for certain parts of the business. And I got to tell you,
yeah.
the language around Surface was incredibly negative and will be even worse in the current quarter.
Hmm.
And they called out what I basically take to mean that we as a company or that as a group did not go to market with the right mix of products. Like it was like like we just didn't do the right thing.
Yeah,
In addition to all of the problems with the industry, and we have opinions about that. Honestly, I think the Surface lineup is okay. I don't, whatever, but you can make a case for Surface. I think Xbox, like I said, I'd been calling on that to be spun off for a long time. Today, I think it makes sense within the wider company because of the cloud stuff.
hmm,
And then Windows is, yeah, it's not as big as smartphones, but it's still freaking really big. And you don't get rid of that.
yeah,
Windows today is much bigger than it was when Windows was dominant, because the market itself and Microsoft itself are bigger overall than things were back then. So, you know, yeah, that business is the smallest of the three businesses, but it's
hmm,
still made like 14 billion, whatever the number was. That number much bigger than Microsoft, than that group or whatever that equivalent group was
yeah.
in 2010 and 2000
Sure.
and 1995, whatever number year you want to pick. So no, I wouldn't. No, I don't see any reason for that.
We'll see. Well, I'm not expecting them to do that. I mean, I think, Paul, you started to allude to there's an antitrust thing happening over in the EU around Teams that they're opening that up, which we'll see what happens there. I mean, you
Yeah, but
can't ignore
what?
that Skype and Link existed.
There is a that kind of change, like the change that the U.S. government wanted to make with Microsoft, is what we call like a structural change.
Yeah.
One of the things we're starting to see in the U.S., not elsewhere, but in the U.S., is this notion of divestiture or divesting companies of businesses that they acquired in the past because what they're doing now is unfair.
Yeah,
or whatever.
That's what they want with Google, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Like take DoubleClick away from Google. Wow,
yeah.
Like that's big stuff.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen with Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
Like for whatever the complaints are about Teams, the only divesting that might occur there, at the most extreme, would be forcing Microsoft to charge customers explicitly for Teams.
Yep.
Like that's, like no one is saying Teams has to be spun off into its own company or Microsoft 365 has to be spun off. It's we're not talking about anything drastic like that. I don't see. Well, okay. I mean, are things bad enough where a company could, of their own volition, say, you know what, we might be better off if Google spun off Pixel or Microsoft spun off Surface, or you can make anything up you want. I don't know.
I mean, the other thing too is Zoom exists. Like Zoom came out of nowhere and ate Microsoft's lunch for a while. I don't know how their market share is today, but I mean, it's not like companies can't exist. The only thing in my head that makes sense is right what you're saying is Microsoft would have to take the Office 365 SKU or whatever calling it this week, break out Teams, and then they would have to charge less for the Office 365 bundle and then charge for that team, so that adding it together is what you pay today. And then there's at least, I guess, maybe an option where you could drop Teams and use Slack instead. I don't know.
Sure.
But then it gets messy. It gets real messy.
You know what? The problem is Slack is not a one-to-one replacement for Teams. That's the thing.
Yeah,
if you go back and look at the original Slack complaint against Teams, which is the basis for this lawsuit in the EU, a couple things that stand out. One, their complaint is nonsense. And first, it's complete, absolute nonsense. And that was true back then. It's way more true today. They talked about Teams as being some kind of a weak copycat product.
Yeah.
That wasn't, I mean, you might have made the argument in 1.0 maybe, but Teams has, evolution has accelerated so much over the years. It's in a different league now.
Yeah.
It's not even fair to compare those two products. Slack is like the tiniest percentage of functionality available in Teams. Also, problematically for those guys, they were acquired for tens of billions of dollars by Salesforce. This is what undermined the U.S. case against Microsoft in the early 2000s, or actually in the late 1990s, because right in the middle of the trial, Netscape was acquired by AOL. And the whole point of this complaint was, you have made our business unviable. And then they were bought for, I don't remember the number there, but it was billions, whatever the number was. And that's exactly what happened with Slack. So it's like, guys, the EU is a different thing. I mean, I'm sure they'll whatever, but that complaint is nonsense. 90% nonsense, I would say.
We'll see. We
will see,
Yeah. No, it's Friday. How long are you in the Boston area?
Just for the weekend. We got a big kind of group event scheduled a million years ago. That seemed like such a good idea at the time. And then as Friday came or Thursday came when we drove, I was like, ugh.
Yeah, it's like, we got to do this still.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm just going to stress all weekend about a football game that's Sunday at 6 p.m. So.
Yeah. You guys are playing, is it Kansas?
Yeah, Kansas City at Kansas City. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
That's a tough game.
You'll be fine. It should be a good game.
It should be a good game, hopefully. And we win, hopefully.